we can admit, and we have to admit, we were caught by surprise, exactly like what happened 50 years ago on Yom Kippur War. The terrorists took advantage of a Jewish holiday, and we were caught by surprise. But it's more than just a surprise. We were not ready for the brutality, for the barbaric approach of those militias. When they entered Israel, they didn't attack military bases. They went to peaceful communities on the border, dragged families out of their homes, executed them, and dragged dozens of them into Gaza. And today, when we start to count the numbers, it's very hard for us. More than 1,000 victims in one day. We never saw such atrocities since the days of the Holocaust. So for us to see those videos and footage of barbaric terrorists entering homes, taking elderly people and kids and committing a massacre, it is very hard for us. We feel the pain in Israel, all of us, but we gather the strength to stand up and to fight back. And we will start to fight back in the next few days.
As you say, this is unusual, especially for the attack on civilians. Hard to ever make sense in a situation like this. But how do you think about this approach that we saw by Hamas in terms of this attack?
Well, we shouldn't look for logic when you deal with terrorists. Same for 9/11 with Al-Qaeda or ISIS. It's not the same logic way we think about goals and moving forward. We left Gaza. We left Gaza 18 years ago. We took out all the Jewish communities, and we hope that it will be a peaceful entity next to us. Then look what happened. Hamas took over, kicked out the Palestinian Authority, and it became a hub for terrorism. And all the funds that the international community spends on Gaza goes for terrorism, for digging tunnels, developing the techniques, and we saw their capabilities. They came from the sea, from the air, from tunnels, and the main goal was to sow destruction in our communities, chaos, and they think that maybe it will serve them, but they will learn very soon that it was a grave mistake. They will pay a heavy price. We will hunt them down, and I think they will feel the might of the IDF in the near future. And I call the government of Israel to make a very clear statement that the goal of the operation should be to eradicate Hamas, period, to finish it, not to have another round and then a ceasefire, because then we will wake up in a few years with another attack.
Mr. Ambassador, how do you eradicate Hamas from Gaza?
Well, first of all, I have to acknowledge it's not going to be an easy task. It will require a lot of effort, but basically you have to conquer the land and to make the distinction between the population and the militants. As we speak, we're sending messages to certain neighborhoods in Gaza, calling for the residents to move out from those neighborhoods. We do not have a desire to hurt civilian population. Unlike Hamas, they commit a double war crime. They target civilians, and then they hide behind civilians, and they use them as human shields. We have the exact opposite goal, is to minimize the casualties among civilians, and we're trying to convince them to move away from the strategic Hamas headquarters.
Ambassador, how do you do this, though? We talked about if Iran, although our officials have come out and said, specifically, I'm talking about our National Security Council spokesman, John Kirby, talking on MSNBC, on CNN, saying that they do not have any specific intelligence or evidence that points to direct participation by Iran in these attacks against Israel. But if indeed, and Israel moves forward with some deep retaliation, and ultimately if Iran is involved in some way and you engage Iran, and then as we heard from an earlier guest, Iran and all of its proxies, whether it's Syria, whether it's Lebanon, how do you avoid this not getting out of control worse than it is already?
So Iran is very involved in everything in the region. They spend billions on promoting chaos, instability, funding Hamas and Hezbollah, and training both proxies. And we know that they are very involved. There are some speculation about, their desire to block a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And maybe that's why, because there is no reason for the timing. Nothing happened. It was an unprovoked attack. So maybe one of the speculation that they wanted to delay any progress in the negotiations with the Saudis. But the Iranians should know that we are not playing games. If Hezbollah will attack us, we will retaliate, and it will be painful for Hezbollah and also for the Lebanese people.
We have seen the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, talking on via television earlier this evening, talking about unifying the party. How important is that, and how likely is that in this environment?
So I think it's time for unity. I think we understand now that we don't have the luxury of arguing on internal domestic issues. The enemy of Hamas, they do not make the distinction between coalition and opposition. And I hope that we will have a unity government soon.
Is it likely? Is it likely from what you are hearing?
Yes, I think it's moving to that direction. It's not going to last for forever, but for the time we are involved in a war against Hamas, I think it can be helpful. The people of Israel, we are under a very major emotional stress in the last few days. Seeing those footage, knowing that today, as we speak, you have kids, toddlers, at the age of 3 years old, in the hand of Hamas, women that they were raped and dragged into Gaza. This is, we built a Jewish state in order to protect the Jewish people, and we never thought that somebody will come into Israel and commit such an horrible atrocity against us.
Ambassador,
so
just in the last,
I think a unity government is the right thing.
Just
right.
in the last minute that we have with you, how far geographically is Israel willing to go to defend itself? Is it willing to go to Iran? Is it willing to go to the north? Is it willing to go? We know it's willing to go into Gaza. How far is it willing to go?
And we just have about 25, 30 seconds, please.
We don't have a desire to expand the war. We focus on the war against Hamas, period. But if we will not have a choice, we will go anywhere around the world to protect ourselves.